Humans gave aliens one warning. Your worlds will burn. The Galactic Council was a mighty force that governed the stars. For thousands of years, it had watched over the universe, guiding the rise and fall of countless species. From the towering cities of the Zoltians to the infinite wisdom of the Antari, each species within the Council had its own unique history. Yet none had ever faced a species like humanity. The humans were young. They had only recently discovered the secrets of space travel and had made their first steps into the cosmos. But their rapid rise had not gone unnoticed. The Council, made up of the most powerful and ancient civilizations, had long debated humanity's place in the galaxy. Some feared them, others dismissed them. After all, the humans were just another species among many, or so they thought. It was in the heart of the Council's space station, a vast structure floating near the center of the galaxy, that the fate of the humans would be decided. Representatives from every major species gathered around a massive table in a grand hall. The room hummed with the low chatter of alien voices. Marcus, the human diplomat, stood before them, his hands clenched behind his back. He had been sent by Earth, carrying a message that would forever change the galaxy. "Council," Marcus began, his voice steady, yet filled with an intensity that echoed in the silent room. "You have made a grave mistake. Humanity has come to warn you. One warning and one warning only: your worlds will burn." The room fell into a tense silence. For a moment no one spoke. The alien representatives exchanged confused glances, unsure of how to respond. Some of them chuckled. Others, like the Antari representative, an ancient species known for their calm demeanor, remained unfazed. "What is this?" the Antari diplomat asked, his voice deep and calm. "A human threat? How quaint!" Marcus's gaze didn't waver. He had anticipated this reaction. He knew they would dismiss him. He knew they would laugh at him. But what they didn't know was that humanity had something they couldn't even begin to understand. Something that, if unleashed, would change everything. "We do not make threats," Marcus said, his tone growing colder. "We make promises. We have found a weapon unlike any the galaxy has ever seen, and we will use it if necessary." The room erupted into murmurs. The Zoltian ambassador, a tall, slender figure with shimmering blue skin, rose from her seat, her expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "A weapon?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "You think a species so young can possess a weapon that could harm the greatest civilizations in the galaxy?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Not just harm, destroy." The laughter died down. The other representatives began to listen more closely, intrigued by the human's confidence. For a brief moment, there was uncertainty in the air, like a storm brewing on the horizon. "You speak of destruction," said the Varnak representative, a hulking creature covered in silver scales. "But what could a species like yours possibly have that could compare to the power of the Galactic Council?" Marcus took a deep breath. He had not come here to explain the weapon in full detail. He had only come to deliver a message. The humans had learned the hard way how to survive, how to adapt, and how to win, even when the odds were against them. Now they had a weapon capable of wiping out entire star systems, reducing them to nothing more than cosmic dust. "I will not tell you how," Marcus replied, his voice unwavering. "But know this: if you challenge us, if you decide to oppose us, we will use it, and we will burn your worlds, all of them." The silence in the room was deafening. The council representatives looked at each other, their faces a mix of confusion, anger, and disbelief. Some of them had underestimated humanity. They thought the humans were just another species, fragile and weak, easily crushed beneath the weight of the council's power. But Marcus had just shown them something they could not ignore. "We are not your enemies," Marcus continued, his voice growing softer, almost pleading. "We don't want war, but if it comes to it, we will defend our home, we will defend our people. And we will burn your worlds to keep them safe." There was no response. The council members sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. Some felt the weight of the humans' words sinking in, while others still refused to believe it. But the seed had been planted. Humanity had made its first move. The meeting ended shortly after that, but Marcus could sense that something had changed. The council would no longer see humanity as a small, insignificant species. They would now recognize the humans as a force to be reckoned with. And whether they liked it or not, the galaxy would have to come to terms with the fact that humanity had its own power. As Marcus left the grand hall, the weight of the moment pressed down on him. He had delivered the warning. Now there was no turning back. The council would either listen or they would face the consequences. And he knew that humanity was ready for whatever came next. After the meeting, Marcus returned to Earth, his mind racing with the weight of the conversation he had just experienced. The Galactic Council had laughed at him, dismissed him as nothing more than an overconfident human. But deep down, Marcus knew the truth. Humanity had the power to destroy worlds, power that no other species could even imagine. Back on Earth, deep within a hidden underground facility, a team of engineers and scientists were working tirelessly on a project that could change the course of history. The weapon, known only as the Burning Star, was the result of years of research, experimentation, and countless sacrifices. It had been humanity's secret, one that no alien could have anticipated. The project had begun long before the Council had even thought about the humans' rise to power. In secret laboratories scattered around the globe, teams of brilliant minds had worked to develop a technology so advanced that it would make the most sophisticated alien weapons look primitive. Humanity had discovered a way to harness dark matter, the mysterious force that bound the universe together, and turn it into a destructive weapon capable of creating miniature black holes, perfectly contained but incredibly powerful. These black holes could consume entire star systems, reducing them to nothing more than a void in space. Marcus had been one of the first to witness the test of the weapon. The first demonstration had taken place on a barren planet located on the edge of the galaxy, far away from any inhabited worlds. The weapon had been fired into the heart of the planet's core, and in a fraction of a second, the planet was gone. No explosion, no sound, just a sudden emptiness where the planet once stood. It was as if the universe had swallowed it whole. As Marcus sat in the control room, watching the images of the destruction on the monitors, he couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. The weapon was powerful beyond belief, and its consequences were unimaginable. He had been part of the team that developed it, but now that it was ready for deployment, he was beginning to question whether it was worth the price. The scientists and military leaders who worked alongside Marcus were resolute in their belief that the weapon was necessary. Earth had always been vulnerable. The aliens, with their superior technology and vast resources, could have wiped out humanity in an instant if they had ever deemed it necessary. The weapon was humanity's only means of survival, and they had to be ready to use it if the Council decided to make a move. But Marcus wasn't so sure. He had witnessed the devastation caused by the Burning Star, and part of him wondered whether there was another way. He couldn't shake the feeling that once humanity unleashed the weapon, there would be no turning back. The galaxy would forever be changed, and not necessarily for the better. As the days passed, the tension between Earth and the Galactic Council grew. The Council's representatives had made it clear that they saw humanity as a threat, but they hadn't taken Marcus's warning seriously. They had underestimated the resolve of the human race, just as many had done throughout history. But now, the stakes were higher than ever. Marcus spent sleepless nights reviewing the data from the Burning Star tests. The weapon was flawless, and humanity was ready to defend itself. But what if the weapon was never used? What if the humans chose a different path? Could they avoid the war that seemed inevitable? Could they find a way to coexist with the Council, even if that meant giving up their secret weapon? These were questions that haunted Marcus as he sat alone in his office, staring at the holographic projection of the galaxy. He had never wanted to be the one to decide the fate of billions of lives, but now he had no choice. He was part of the team that had created the weapon, and he was part of the decision-making process that would determine whether or not it would be used. The following week, the tension finally boiled over. A fleet of ships from the Galactic Council arrived in Earth's orbit, signaling their intention to invade. They had come to take action to force humanity to bend to their will. Marcus knew that this was the moment. The Council had made their move, and now humanity had to respond. On Earth, the government gave the order. The Burning Star would be deployed. In the control room, Marcus stood alongside the military leaders who had been waiting for this moment. The atmosphere was tense, filled with an energy that could be felt in the pit of the stomach. The fate of the galaxy was now in their hands. The weapon had been prepared for this exact situation. The countdown began, 10 seconds. Marcus watched the monitors as the weapon was primed for activation. He could feel his heart racing, his mind racing with thoughts of what was about to happen. Was this really the right decision? Was there no other way? 5 seconds. The countdown continued, and Marcus's doubts began to cloud his judgment. He had always believed in humanity's ability to survive, to overcome impossible odds. But now, with the weapon ready to fire, he wondered if they were crossing a line that could never be undone. 1 second. The weapon was fired. In the distance, in the far reaches of space, the fleet of the Galactic Council was caught off guard. They had no idea what was coming. The burning star pierced the void, traveling faster than light, until it reached its target, a small, uninhabited moon on the outskirts of a distant system. In an instant, the moon was consumed by a small black hole, and the system collapsed into nothingness. The ship commanders of the Council watched in horror as their monitors displayed the unimaginable destruction. A moon, a whole world, gone in the blink of an eye. There was no explosion, no warning, just the eerie silence of space. Back on Earth, Marcus watched the results of the deployment with a mixture of dread and disbelief. The weapon had done its job, but the cost was something he had never truly understood until now. Humanity had proven its power, but at what cost? The Council would no longer see humanity as weak or insignificant. They would know now that the humans had a power that could rival their own. But the real question was, how would they respond? What would the future hold for humanity, now that the weapon had been fired and the galaxy was forever changed? As the news of the destruction spread, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just crossed a line, one that could never be undone. The weapon had done its job, but now, the true consequences of using it were just beginning to unfold. The war was only beginning, and the path ahead would be one of uncertainty, fear, and the constant question of whether humanity had made the right choice. The universe had always been a place of unyielding power, where civilizations rose and fell, but the events unfolding were like nothing the galaxy had seen. Humanity's weapon, the Burning Star, had shaken the Galactic Council to its core. The message was clear: Earth would not be cowed. The Council had been warned, but they had not believed. The destruction of the moon was just the beginning. As the black hole consumed its target, the Council scrambled to respond. It wasn't just a test of power, it was a declaration of war. The alien fleet, caught off guard by the sudden show of force, retreated to their strongholds. For the first time, the Council realized they were dealing with a species they had grossly underestimated. The days following the destruction were tense. News of the attack spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and whispers of humanity's power rippled through the alien empires. On Earth, Marcus sat in the control room, watching the aftermath unfold. The global community was divided. Some saw the destruction as a necessary action, a protective measure against the Council's looming threat. Others were filled with doubt, wondering whether unleashing such a weapon had been worth it. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in him. He had always believed in humanity's ability to rise above adversity, but now he was beginning to question whether they had crossed a line. The weapon was powerful, too powerful, and its potential consequences were far-reaching. It was easy to call it a defense mechanism, to tell himself that they had no choice, but deep down, Marcus knew that there was always a choice. And now that the weapon had been used, there was no going back. The Galactic Council was not a group of fools. They had seen what humans were capable of, and they would not let this attack go unanswered. Behind closed doors in their grandest citadel, the Council's leaders met in secrecy, planning their next move. The destruction of the moon had left them stunned, but they were far from defeated. The Council was composed of numerous species, each with their own distinct culture and history, but they had one thing in common: an unyielding desire for control. They would not allow humanity to disrupt the balance of power they had so carefully maintained. But they had underestimated one key factor: the human spirit. The first wave of retaliation came swiftly. The Council's fleet, vast and well-equipped, descended upon Earth's orbit like a storm. Hundreds of ships, sleek and deadly, filled the skies, their weapons primed for destruction. The Council had made it clear: they would not allow humanity to live in peace, not after such an act of defiance. They wanted to remind the humans of their place in the galaxy, but humanity was not the same species they had once been. Earth's forces were ready, having spent the days after the first strike preparing for this very moment. The human fleet, though smaller in numbers, was more determined, more resourceful. They had one advantage the Council did not. They had fought for survival their entire history, and they would not be easily defeated. In the heat of the battle, Marcus stood at the helm of Earth's flagship, his mind racing. The Council's ships were closing in fast, but humanity's fleet was ready for them. The first volley of fire erupted from the human ships, the weapons of the burning star still fresh in their minds. Marcus could feel the weight of the decision resting on his shoulders. He had warned them. He had shown them the power humanity held, and now the consequences were unfolding before his eyes. The battle was fierce. The sky above Earth became a war zone, filled with flashing lights, explosive bursts, and the deafening sound of weaponry. The Council's fleet was strong, but they had underestimated the resolve of the humans. Every ship, every soldier fought with everything they had. For the first time in their history, humanity was not playing defense. They were fighting for their very survival. As the battle raged on, Marcus's thoughts turned to the weapon. He knew that the burning star could shift the tide of the war, but using it would come with consequences. If humanity unleashed it again, there would be no turning back. The destruction would be far greater than anything they had already witnessed. Entire systems could be wiped out in an instant. He had already made the decision once, but now, faced with the reality of battle, he wondered if he could do it again. The human fleet held its ground. The Council's ships began to falter, retreating slowly as the humans pushed back with all their might. The Council had underestimated the strength of a species that had fought for survival on its own planet for centuries. But even as victory seemed within reach, Marcus knew that this war was far from over. The Galactic Council would not give up so easily. They had too much at stake. As the battle seemed to reach its climax, a call came through on Marcus's communication line. It was from Earth's High Command. They had prepared to deploy the Burning Star once again to end the conflict once and for all. But Marcus hesitated. The weapon's power was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and he couldn't help but feel that using it again would be a mistake. It would bring peace, yes, but at a terrible cost. His mind flashed back to the peaceful days before the war had started. Humanity had been on the brink of greatness, not just in power but in unity. The weapon was meant to protect, not to destroy. Could he really go through with it again? Could he justify the use of such devastation, even if it meant ensuring humanity's survival? The decision weighed heavily on his shoulders as he stared at the battlefield before him. The burning stars that had once symbolized humanity's greatest achievement now felt like a curse. Marcus knew that the future of the galaxy rested in his hands. He could end the war, end the suffering, but at what cost? For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The chaos of the battle, the flashing lights, the explosion of ships, it all faded away. Marcus was left standing at the crossroads of history, wondering if humanity had truly made the right choice. Could they survive the future they had created? Could they truly win this war without losing their soul? The war between humanity and the Galactic Council had reached a turning point. After the first successful use of the Burning Star, the Council had not backed down. They saw the weapon as a challenge, a declaration that humanity had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The space around Earth had become a battleground, the sky filled with explosions, laser fire, and the shriek of ships engaged in fierce combat. The galaxy had never seen a war like this, where two forces, one ancient, the other just beginning its journey, fought for survival. Marcus had made his choice, and now he had to live with the consequences. The decision to deploy the Burning Star had brought humanity to the edge of victory, but it had also set the stage for an even greater conflict. The Council's retaliation had been swift and brutal, yet humanity had proven its resolve. The human fleet, though smaller, had fought with a fire that the Council had never anticipated. The Council's forces were formidable, their weapons far beyond what humanity had known, but the humans were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting for their lives, their future. The Council, seeing the damage inflicted upon their fleet, had retreated, regrouping in their distant strongholds. For a time, the fighting had slowed, but Marcus knew it wouldn't last. The Council would be back. The desire for control, for supremacy over the galaxy, was too strong. They could not allow humanity to hold the power they had now shown, but Marcus was beginning to wonder if humanity had done enough. Was it worth it? The Burning Star had proven its power, but each time it was used, the consequences weighed more heavily on his heart. Marcus knew that if it were fired again, the destruction would be even worse. There would be no turning back. A weapon like that was not just a tool of war, It was a symbol, one that represented humanity's desperation. It had become their last resort, and they had used it. But what if there was another way? The leaders of Earth had gathered in an underground command center, surrounded by monitors displaying live footage from the battle. The room was tense, filled with military commanders, scientists, and diplomats. The battle outside had raged for days, but now there was a brief pause. The council had retreated temporarily, licking their wounds, but it wouldn't last. Marcus knew the humans had to decide quickly. Would they continue to escalate, or would they find a way to end this without destroying everything? "We need to prepare," said General O'Brien, the commander of Earth's military forces. "The council will come back." "We have to be ready." Marcus didn't respond immediately. His mind was elsewhere. He had been part of this fight from the beginning, but now he was questioning the path humanity had chosen. The use of the burning star had been a desperate measure, but it had also shown humanity's strength. Could they continue down this path, or was there another way? "There has to be a way to end this without destroying more of the galaxy," Marcus said, finally breaking the silence. His voice was tired, weighed down by the burden of leadership. "We've already shown them our power. They won't take us lightly again, but we have to be careful. If we fire the burning star again, we may win the war, but we'll lose our place in the galaxy." There was a pause. The room fell silent, the weight of Marcus's words sinking in. General O'Brien stood up, walking to the front of the room. His face was grim, the lines on his face deepened by the stress of the conflict. "I understand your concerns, Marcus," the general said. "But we've already shown them mercy. We've given them a warning, and they've come back to attack us. The only way to stop them is to make sure they understand we will not back down." Marcus shook his head. "Mercy. We've killed thousands of lives in the name of mercy. We've destroyed worlds. How is that mercy?" "Sometimes there is no other choice," O'Brien responded firmly. "We can't afford to hesitate. If we do, they'll destroy us. They'll destroy everything." Marcus didn't argue. He understood the general's point. The council would not stop until humanity was either crushed or forced to submit. And humanity was not a species that would submit. But still, Marcus couldn't shake the thought that they were playing a dangerous game. A game that could cost them everything. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the room's screens buzzed to life. A new transmission had come through, one from the Galactic Council. "It's a message," one of the technicians said, "from the Council." Marcus moved quickly to the nearest console. His fingers hovered over the controls, uncertain of what he would see. The last time they had heard from the Council, it had been a threat, a warning that humanity would pay for its defiance. He didn't know what this message would be, but he knew it would change everything. The screen came to life with a holographic projection of the Council's leader, a being known as Janner. Janner was one of the oldest and most powerful beings in the galaxy, a creature of immense wisdom and strength. His species, the Hadrak, had ruled the Council for millennia. He was not one to make threats lightly. "Humanity," Janner began, his voice deep and commanding, "you have made your point. We have seen your power and we have felt the weight of your defiance. But know this, your strength does not scare us. Your threat has only strengthened our resolve. We do not bow to threats and we do not bend to fear." Marcus watched closely as Janner continued. The message was cold, but there was something else in the leader's eyes, a glint of respect. Humanity had proven itself. They had shown that they would fight no matter the cost. "But you have made a mistake, Marcus," Janner said, locking his gaze onto the screen as if he were speaking directly to the human diplomat. "You have underestimated the Council's will. We will not stop until your world is broken. We will not rest until your kind has learned the true meaning of power. You will not survive this conflict." With that, the transmission cut off, leaving the room in stunned silence. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. The message was clear. The Council was not finished. They would come back stronger than before, and they would not stop until humanity was destroyed. "We have to act," General O'Brien said, his voice grim. "Now." But Marcus didn't respond immediately. He had already made his decision. The burning star had proven its power, but it was not the answer. Humanity had to find a way to end this war without destroying the galaxy. They had to fight for their survival, yes, but they could not allow themselves to become the very thing they had feared, the destroyers of worlds. "We fight," Marcus said finally, his voice firm. "But we fight smart. We fight with strategy, not with sheer force. If we use the burning star again, we might win the war, but we'll lose everything else. We can't become what the Council is. We can't let this war define us. The room was silent as Marcus's words sank in. They all knew what was at stake, and they all knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But Marcus was resolved. The war was not over, but humanity had one last chance to decide what kind of future they would have. Would they win the war and lose their soul, or would they find a way to stop the Council without becoming like them? The silence in the control room was almost unbearable. The transmission from the Galactic Council had left everyone in shock, their faces tense with fear and uncertainty. Marcus stood at the center of the room, his mind racing as he tried to process the gravity of the situation. The Council had made it clear they would not stop until humanity was destroyed. The next move was up to him. General O'Brien's voice broke the silence. "What now, Marcus? We can't keep waiting. We need a plan, and we need it fast." Marcus turned to face the general, his eyes cold and resolute. He had made up his mind. The burning star had already done its part. Now it was time for something different. Humanity had shown their strength, but it was their resolve, their ability to think strategically, that would decide the outcome of this war. If they were going to survive, they had to outsmart the Council, not just overpower them. "We fight, but we do it on our terms," Marcus said, his voice steady. "We need to lure them into a trap. We can't use the burning star again. Not yet, at least. We'll need to buy time." A tense silence followed his words as the others in the room processed what he was saying. General O'Brien stepped forward, his expression hardening. "You're saying we don't use the weapon? After everything that's happened, you're willing to risk it all for a strategy?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, the weapon's power is undeniable, but it's also too dangerous. The Council will retaliate with even more force if we use it again. We can't become the very thing we're fighting against. The Burning Star was a warning. Now we need to show them that we are more than just a weapon. We're humanity. And humanity doesn't fight with sheer force alone." O'Brien didn't look convinced, but he knew Marcus was right. The Council had already been rattled by humanity's strength, but the use of the Burning Star had pushed them to the brink. Another demonstration of that power could destroy everything they were fighting for. They needed to outlast the Council, to show them that humanity was capable of more than just destruction. Marcus turned back to the monitors, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the surface of the console. "I've been thinking, if we can delay their forces long enough, we can turn the tide. We'll need to weaken their command structure, cut off their supply lines, and hit them where it hurts. We'll make them believe we're weaker than we are, draw them into a position where they have no choice but to underestimate us." The other officers and military leaders in the room nodded, starting to see the logic in Marcus's plan. It wouldn't be easy. The Council had vast resources, and their ships were far more advanced than humanity's. But Marcus was confident that if they could play it smart, they could create openings to strike. "First, we need to establish control over key communication networks," Marcus continued. "We'll disrupt their ability to coordinate attacks, make them think we're scattered and vulnerable. At the same time, we need to create distractions, small victories that will keep them focused on the wrong things. The more they spread themselves thin, the easier it will be to strike." General O'Brien gave a sharp nod, finally on board with the plan. "I'll have our forces ready to carry out the strategy, but if they don't take the bait, we'll be ready," Marcus interrupted. "If they come at us full force, we'll adapt, but we won't go down without a fight." The plan was set into motion almost immediately. Marcus's heart raced with anticipation as Earth's military and strategic forces mobilized. They would need to stay several steps ahead of the Council at all times. Every move had to be calculated, every decision had to be precise. It was a dangerous game, but it was their only option. As the days passed, the tension between Earth and the Galactic Council grew. Humanity's forces moved in the shadows, launching small-scale operations designed to disrupt the Council's plans. They targeted supply lines, communication hubs, and strategic locations, all while keeping the Council's forces focused on false leads. It was working. The Council, believing humanity was weaker than they had initially thought, spread their forces thin, sending ships to distant sectors in search of easy victories. But Marcus knew they couldn't keep this up forever. They had to act soon. Every passing day was a day closer to the Council realizing they had been tricked, and when that happened, there would be no more room for deception. They would have to face the Council head-on. Then, the breakthrough came. Intelligence reports indicated that the Council's leadership was planning a decisive strike, an attack meant to crush humanity once and for all. The Council's forces were gathering near the outer rim of the galaxy, preparing to launch an all-out assault on Earth. The time for deception was over. Marcus knew that they had only one chance to strike. The human fleet, though smaller and less advanced than the Council's, had been bolstered by weeks of tactical strikes. They had captured alien ships and technology, learning from their enemies' strengths and weaknesses. The balance had shifted. Humanity was no longer fighting a defensive war. They were ready to take the fight to the Council. Marcus stood at the helm of Earth's flagship, the monitors in front of him displaying the movements of the enemy fleet. They were closing in fast, but Marcus wasn't afraid. He had led humanity through the darkest moments of the war, and now he had one final chance to bring it to an end. "All units prepare for the final assault," he ordered. "We're going in. This ends today." The human fleet surged forward, its ships moving in tight formation. The Council's forces were surprised at how quickly humanity had gathered its strength, but it was too late for them to turn back now. The final battle was upon them. The sky above Earth filled with the sound of battle. Ships collided, and weapons discharged with terrifying force. The human fleet, despite being outnumbered, fought with all their might. Every soldier, every pilot, every ship was determined to see this war through to the end. As the battle raged on, Marcus's mind stayed focused on the task at hand. He had no room for hesitation now. The Council's ships were faltering, their lines breaking apart under the pressure of humanity's relentless assault. They had underestimated the human spirit, and now they would pay the price. Hours later, the battle came to a stunning conclusion. The last of the Council's ships were either destroyed or forced to retreat. The remaining leaders of the Council realized that humanity was not just a threat to be wiped out. They were a force to be reckoned with. The balance of power had shifted. In the aftermath of the war, the galaxy was forever changed. Humanity had proven that they were more than capable of defending themselves. They had survived against impossible odds and had come out victorious. Marcus stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, gazing out at the stars. The war was over. The Council had been defeated, but the cost had been high. Thousands of lives had been lost, and the scars of battle would remain. But humanity had won. They had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated, that they would never bow to anyone, no matter how powerful. As the sun began to rise over Earth, Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of peace. They had made it. Humanity had fought for its place in the galaxy, and now the universe would know their name.